Greetings everyone, Ambassador Kosh coming at you again today with another video, and we're going to be continuing our exploration of the decade of the 1980s. This is going to be I don't want to say, well, this is going to be a movie review, and it's going to be another little cult classic. During the 1980s, a very prevalent theme, especially after the release of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back especially, and those were such big box office hits. A lot of your major and minor studios and anything were trying to get their hands on properties or come up with brand new ideas for stuff that either focused very strictly on this whole sci-fi craze that was going on throughout the 1980s, or they were trying to find mashups. And what we're going to be covering today is one of my favorite 1980s sci-fi slash fantasy classics, Krull. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it kind of bears a resemblance, a similarity to another very popular 1980s film, Princess Bride. Think of Krull as a cross between, well, Princess Bride meets Star Wars, in a manner of speaking. And honestly, this movie got a lot of big name actors their starts. It stars Ken Marshall, Lisette Anthony, I believe her name is, Freddie Jones. He did a lot of work in the 1980s as well. But two names that you probably are familiar with, especially if you are a Star Wars or Harry Potter fan, is Liam Neeson has a role in this, as does Robbie Cantrell, or Robert Cantrell. Liam Neeson obviously has his connection to Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Robert Cantrell. Actually, he had two very profitable and well-known franchises in the 1980s going into the 2000s. And one was Harry Potter, and he made a series of appearances in the Pierce Brosnan run of James Bond films, where he played a Russian mobster, for lack of a better term. And anyway, Krull, it's unique. I will say this and everything. And a lot like a lot of the movies from the 1980s, it grew a cult following through home video release and so on, and it eventually did make its way to DVD. And I'm not sure if it's coming on Blu-ray yet or not. So if anybody knows if it has, comment down below, let me know. But I imagine, I'd say it's a safe bet it has. But Krull was, as I just mentioned, it was kind of a it was a mashup. It was like I said, it was a cross between. You can even go one step further and say it's a cross between Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, because you've got this very medieval-esque society on this planet. It takes place on the planet called Krull, and you have this interstellar adversary called simply just the Beast, and he has this army at his disposal called the Slayers. And the design of the Slayers, it kind of is a copy of the Stormtroopers from Star Wars, but it's not an exact style copy, because whereas Stormtroopers are basically just guys in suits of white armor, the Slayers, they were kind of almost like bioorganic army. A way of putting it. If you killed one of them and you shot them in the head, and you actually do see this in a couple instances in the movie, the Slayers would have this creature just kind of scurry out of their head. So it was almost, actually, a good comparison between the Slayers would be the Daleks, because from Doctor Who. Because the Slayer, your Daleks and everything, yeah, they had that huge, or that large mechanical casing, but basically inside it was like an oversized squid or octopus or something like that. Just a very mean, very vicious, a very ugly octopus. But the basic gist of this story, Krull, in a manner of speaking, it's kind of your standard fantasy story, just with some sci-fi elements tossed in for good effect. And I'd say, for a mashup between sci-fi and fantasy, It's not bad. I don't know. I don't recall how well it did at the box office at the time, but that's beside the point. Um, for myself, I had searched for a copy of it for the longest time. I actually found a copy of Krull at a secondhand media store where I live, and got it for cheap. But I didn't care. It was on DVD. It didn't have a whole lot of special features. They had some. It had a behind the scenes making of the movie, which for the 1980s wasn't very common. Um, you would see stuff like this from time to time, but I think as DVD was becoming very popular, these studios were going back and seeing, hey, is there any making of footage and anything that we can throw on here so people have some idea of what went on into the making of this movie? And luckily enough, um, the studio that ended up buying Krull and releasing it on DVD and I imagine eventually Blu-ray did find a behind the scenes making of Krull, and it's actually a real interesting little story that they give you. Um, the story itself is fairly basic, but it's very engaging. Um, it's basically your standard hero goes on quest, finds old man who guides him on his quest, gathers a group of soldiers and everything to help him on his quest, and to save the damsel in distress and beat the bad guy. And Ken Marshall plays the hero. I think his name is Corwin. Yeah, that sounds about right. Freddie Jones plays the wise old man, the like Obi-Wan as old wise man that leads the hero on his journey. And while it is kind of paint by numbers and everything in terms of the story, it still grabs you because like I said, it's a very interesting concept because you've got this medieval-esque society. You've got these two kingdoms that are joining forces are joining together through marriage of the son and the daughter from opposite parties. And in the end, the Corwin and I forget the name of Lisette Anthony's character in the movie. I hate this. I hate when I forget a character's name, and I bet you a dime a dozen I'll remember after I finish this Blade video. But anyway, what ends up happening is they go through partway through the marriage ceremony when the Slayers come in and kidnap Lisette Anthony's character. And eventually, Corwin gets his group together. He basically promises a group of rogues, brigands, robbers, but honorable robbers, that if they aid him on his quest and everything, that they will have their freedom. And the other guys and everything, Robbie Contrell and Liam Neeson are actually part of the group and anything that joined forces with Ken Marshall. Ken Marshall's hero. What ends up happening is they go on this adventure. They meet all these different characters and creatures. You have the Emerald Wizard. You have this very tall fella and everything. He's a Cyclops. And a lot of stuff is alluded to, and you almost wish they had done a sequel or even done a prequel to this movie where you could learn more about the different characters in this universe, because I think this would have been a really cool universe to explore. But unfortunately, they never did. I don't know if anybody's done any fan fictions based on Krull or not, but might be a fun little journey to go on. But for the 1980s, you had so many movies coming out like this or anything that it kind of flooded the market, and people were like, this seems a little too much like a copycat of Star Wars and something else. And I'm just like, some people just checked out. They weren't particularly interested. But there were those and everything that saw the movie and really enjoyed it. I don't remember exactly what the critical reviews were for the movie, if they were middle of the road, if they were really positive or whatever, if they were really negative. But as time went on, a lot like several of the movies that I have and will be talking about in this series, it had legs later down the road. It held on to a cult following of people who really enjoyed it, and have held on to it ever since. So I will say the iconography, some of, in particular, one piece of iconography from the movie that I think a lot of people remember, and that's in particular is the glaive. I think it's called, yeah, and it's this 5-star, almost like a overpowered shuriken, a ninja shuriken, a throwing star, something like that. Um, Kim Marshall's character Corwin has to go in search of the glaive, and he does obviously find it, and it plays a pivotal part in the final battle with the beast. And this thing is just, it's ugly. It's obviously it's just a guy in a suit, but it was a really good suit. I mean, obviously for our time, for 2019 or the 2000s, it's kind of cheesy, but it's a good kind of cheesy. It's a fun kind of cheesy, and it's not cringeworthy like if we watched one of those old monster movies from the 1950s or anything now, where you can tell it's just a guy in a suit. They tried to give the beast some character, tried to make him very menacing, and they worked and everything for the time. And I think honestly, the idea of Corwin and his brand new bride and everything joining forces and using their abilities and everything to defeat the beast was kind of cool for the time. He wasn't just the strict damsel in distress. I mean, yeah, she's trapped in this castle, and the beast is doing everything in his power to try and lure her to his side to be her queen, to be his queen. And she keeps telling him no. There's a couple instances where the beast actually takes the form of Corwin, but at first she thinks it is Corwin that's come to rescue her, but in fact, and 1 second later, you can tell it's Corwin. It's not Corwin because his eyes turn completely black, and um, it's basically a seduction story. But the one being seduced is smart enough to see through the beast's illusions and not fall for it and fall prey to it. And I will say it's a fun ride. I do highly recommend it if you like movies of the 1980s, and if you like those type of mashup movies where it's sci-fi and something else mixed with one another. And it does a good job and everything of entertaining you, keeping you entranced and everything in this world. And I will say, and I might do a review on this movie. You have two actors. You have Freddie Jones for one. You have Francesca Annis. They both did a lot of work in the 1980s as well and everything. One other movie that they were both in together, and I don't recall if Krull was made before this or after this, and it's a early adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel Dune. And for those of you who may or may not have heard, they are doing they're doing a brand new version of Dune and everything. It's being directed by the same guy that did Blade Runner 2049. He's done some other work, um, and I'm honestly really excited because I remember the Sci-Fi Channel did a two TV miniseries on their channel and everything of the book Dune and the fall one of the sequels to Dune, Children of Dune, which had James McAvoy and several other fairly known actors at the time. But anyway, that's all I've got for you today on Krull. As I said, if you have an opportunity and you can find a copy of it, or if it's on Amazon or whatever, I do recommend it. I watch it at least maybe once or twice a year, give or take, and anything. I'll pop it out if I just want to be kind of nostalgic and watch something really cool and kind of reminisce about the 1980s. And I will say for the time, it is a good movie. It is entertaining. It kind of gives you a good snapshot of what all the studios in Hollywood were trying to do and everything, trying to find something new and creative to give to the public. And I'm kind of bummed that it didn't do better in the box office than it did because I think um, it could have springboarded Liam Neeson and Roddy Contreras, not to mention all these other actors and actresses that were in this movie, springboard their careers even more so than eventually they would have. So, um, until next time, my friends, this is Ambassador Kosh saying